Well, do you guys have any questions, any comments before we go home? I'm a funny man.
Do
Sure.
people tell you you're funny?
I'm sorry?
Do people tell you you're funny?
Not really.
No? Are you being modest?
I think so. See, that's funny. Yeah.
I'm curious. The lesson in Job and other other teachings is that to go out and experience the world and make mistakes is a great way to
It's okay. Go. Do it now, quickly.
it's a helpful way to learn.
Excellent. Yeah.
A useful way to learn. Or is one method of learning, right? To experience, to make mistakes, and to grow from those. I feel like coupling is an important thing.
Coupling?
Coupling, having a significant other.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an important aspect of many people's lives. Yet it seems that, based on our discussion, it's not necessarily to have failed relationships is not the best method of becoming a parent, or the best path towards becoming a parent and having a successful relationship.
So, making mistakes, being a parent, having a companion, those three areas. Okay, we can talk about them the best we can. Anyone else before we, Andrew?
Talk about relativism.
Relativism. Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Job, is that the one with this guy named Job and the God and the devil? It says he's like only good because he hasn't done a good job. So
Right. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
the lesson is
Okay. Good morning. Anyone else? Relativism, parents, coupling, mistakes? No one? Okay. And yeah. Well, let's talk about relativism very briefly, because most of the things that we talk about in this class really have to do with the way I think about things and my own experiences, and they're very limited in many ways, some of them perhaps profoundly wrong. But as my good Scottish friend from the 17th century, David Hume, would say, I can't step outside of my own self and my own experiences, so I am condemned to only express what I know and what I've thought about and reflected. There is a saying, آب دریا را اگر نتوان کشید هم به قدر تشنگی باید چشید, that there is this ocean, and all ideas are like a drop in this ocean. They can have part of the truth, but they can't be the whole truth. They can be partly true and partly false, but they can be completely false. Thank you. also almost all definitions. And that's the problem with language, because language is rooted in culture, rooted in experiences, rooted in intellectual maturity. And because every single person in this room, and just this room, I'm not talking about cultures, from like Africa or Mexico or India. And because everyone comes from a different background, we attach different meanings to words. And therefore, when we speak, oftentimes, language creates nothing but confusion and conflict, And then some smart aleck from out there will come out and say, well, everything is relative. It's true, everything is relative. But I also do think that if you want to learn, for example, how to play the piano, different teachers will give you different styles, but the foundation, the structure is very much the same. You need to spend a lot of time, you need to like your teacher, you need to like the piano, and you need to sacrifice. So you have some stability within the cradle of relativity, Some of the people I've enjoyed, like Plato and Socrates, James Baldwin, Gandhi, Malcolm X, I like them. I don't think they have access to the entire truth, but I think, which makes their position somewhat relative. But what they do have, good morning, Amir, is that they have access to something that most of us can't have, and will never have. And it seems like they all drink from the same fountain of wisdom. I'm not quite sure where that fountain is, and I don't even know what wisdom looks like. But when you pay attention to what they talk about, they all smell the same. There is this passion within them, there is this fire within them, there is this anger within them. And some of them, of course, express this anger and passion very calmly, eloquently. And some, they raise hell. There was a group of Christians, liberation theology, that came from Chile, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And they interpreted the forgiveness that was expressed by Jesus Christ and compassion by picking up arms and crucifying the villains. And it's no different than Jesus, walking to the temple with his stick and destroying shops and telling people that, they've taken the wrong path towards life or truth or whatever. I think you can have people who speak the truth in a relative way, but again, they're all connected to the same roots. There is this philosophical aspect to it, which is, since none of us can know the whole truth, all answers to all questions can but be relative, which means that no one's ever wrong. So if I say, Andrew, you're an idiot, you say, well, that's your opinion. I think you're an idiot. And the conversation ends. So part of the difficulty of relativism is that it allows all sorts of garbage to be out there. And the moment you want to observe and possibly come to a conclusion that we call a judgment, you get condemned. Well, that's the way I think. Who are you to tell me A, B, C, D? And it's relatively a new phenomenon, maybe 200-300 years. You could be a staunch relativist, but should you desire to learn and become a very proficient piano player, and if you have a really, really good teacher, it won't work. You can't look at your teacher and say, this is the way I want to play. Your teacher will leave. Or if he or she is devoted to you, they'll spank you until you just do as they say. For the most part, I think it depends what you're looking for and where you're at in life. The moment you know what works, if you know that you have to take this class to graduate, this is an absolute truth. It's not like half dark and half light. This is the class you ought to take, and that's it. If on the other hand you're confused, walking around not knowing what to do, you take a philosophy class and stats and this and that, and someone tells you, what are you doing? Well, everything is relative. I think, and this is just my own biased and prejudiced position in life, I think good students should never think. Good students should never feel, and good students should never come to any conclusions. They should always, the moment they want to come to a conclusion, they should put their intellect on pause. Because they're always going to reach the wrong conclusion. You don't have, good morning, you don't have the proper information to come to a relatively good conclusion. You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's an example I hate to use, but I've used it for many, many, many years now, which is you may not like your father because he's never been there, maybe he's been a drunk or whatever the case may have been, you know, and for many years you just conclude that your father is an idiot and you don't want to have to do anything with him. And then as you age and as you realize the difficulties, complexities of life, you know, no one really wants to get, all relationships for the most part, they start their roots on sex, attraction. No one examines it. No one sits back and says, why am I attracted to this person? It just happens. And then the moment you have attraction, you want to put that attraction into physical form, a container. And we call it sex. And so the genesis of almost all relationships are based on sex. Okay. And then out of this physical intimacy and just hanging out for casual reasons, you have emotions blossoming called attachment. One day you wake up and you say, I don't think I want to be in this relationship. But you look at the life you've created with this person and there is no way out. And God forbid if you have a child. Now you want out, but you can't. You have guilt, you have shame, you don't know what to tell your parents. You don't know if you should come out and tell it to your companion. You have a whole host of issues. And you have a job that you hate, and whatever money you make goes towards rent, food, your child, whatever the case may be. At the end of the month, you have nothing left in your account. Add to it, you're dealing with your own confusion in life. What am I doing? Why this? Why that? You know. And we're also condemned for some very, very strange and in some ways unforgivable reasons that we are looking for something we don't know what. You know, it's like the journey never ends. You know, you take rest in a pleasure for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then the journey continues. And you're always working towards some end, and the end is unknown to us. So there's a lot of pressure. And so one of the things that at least in this culture happens is where you smoke, or you watch porn, or you play video games, or you drink. And after you're addicted to these things, you're no longer present for your family, you know. But as a child, you don't realize what your father is going through. You don't realize what any adult goes through. All you know is that I want my father to give me a hug. He doesn't give me a hug. I hate him. I want my father to give me money. He doesn't give me money. I hate him. And the truth is, this kid has to wait for a long, long time. And then he has to come to realize, you know, I'm tired of just hating and having people walk into my life and then push them out. You know, there's a scene in, I think, Al Pacino played, he was like a football coach, and his team was losing any given Sunday, I think, where he looks at his team and he says, you know, maybe this is my last season with you guys, and if you're down, you know, 150 to 0, you know, you guys can go out there and just lose, or you can go out there and just pour your blood out there, you know. And he tells his own story. Every person whom I've ever loved, who's ever loved me, I pushed away. I pissed all my money on gambling, you know, and I'm getting old, I have no one in my life. You kind of get caught, you know, if you are somewhat of a religious person, at least religious sensibilities, you know, you can kind of look at this as Jesus Christ, all of a sudden the kingdom of God rises within you, and the Jesus inside you looks at all the things you have done, and you say, okay, Andrew, that's enough hating. You've lost everything. You've lost all the money. You've lost all your companions. Grow up now. And then you begin to kind of look at your life, and then all of a sudden the image of your father comes in. And they say, oh, did my father go through all of this? And then you catch yourself drinking very much like the way your father did. And you say, that's the reason. And now at the age of 40, I mean, you've been not liking your father for 30 years, all because of incomplete information. And even if you had the information, you didn't understand the information. Even if you did understand the information, you didn't have the proper emotions connected to the information or the understanding. So it just sits there, Hello, Emerson. And now that your plate has more information on it, that has experience, that has understanding, that has feelings, now you look at your father and say, maybe it's time I should just go knock on his door. And I think that's a better way of looking the concept they call relativism. Not so much as a cultural phenomenon or as a philosophical, abstract concept, but as something that all of us are engaged with all the time. It's something we talked about, I think, in this class, Jainism. Good morning. That there are 365 different ways of looking at things. And most of us are far too lazy to go out and look for all those different windows to look at a certain issue. Because of laziness, because of comfort, because of just, limitations of many sorts. You can only have access to maybe 5 or 6 or 10 windows. And what you look, you feel it to be sufficient to come to a conclusion. And then time passes, you realize you were wrong. Mistakes. The best people you will ever encounter in your life are those who have made a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes. So, my recommendation, not to those of you who are old and slowly becoming senile, but to those of you who are young, go out there and make a lot of mistakes. And the only way you can do that is by experiencing things. Just jump into things. Remember the wisdom of Jesus Christ, We are born in sin. We have no choice but to make mistakes. This is our first time. Our knowledge is limited. The way we think about things are limited. The way we feel and come to conclusions are always limited. You have no choice but to make mistakes. So make a lot of them. Make a lot of mistakes from the time you're born until about maybe 30. Hopefully at the age of 30 you say, I am done with making mistakes. I am tired, I'm exhausted, I've been beaten down for the past 30 years. Then, go somewhere, read a lot of books, write a lot of emotions and thoughts down, grow some intellectual and emotional teeth, and go back into your life and retrieve the experiences, observe them, see what lives inside them, how they came about, what they did to you. And out of all the sins that you have committed in the last 30 years of your life, out of it comes a good amount of wisdom. But you can't get wisdom without sinning. Sin is your initiation towards wisdom. But it's not really. You have to be able to process sin really, really well. We have no choice but to make mistakes. So if you think, for example, you got married for the wrong reason. You got married. It didn't end too well. Well, first, there's going to be a good amount of shame. You're going to beat up yourself. You're going to seek therapy, maybe drugs, maybe alcohol, maybe porn. You'll go out on dates. You'll be angry with this person across the table. Fine. At a certain point, you will grow extremely exhausted, inwardly and outwardly. You'll get depressed. That's fine. You'll find yourself in this deep, dark pit. That's good too. But all of it is good. if at a certain point teeth grows somewhere inside you and a mouth grows, well, you begin to eat the sins, and then you begin to chew on them, break them open, and by the time you get to this place, hopefully you have a digestive system that works really, really well. And now push down the experience, the sin, and let your system process it. And what you poop out is what we call wisdom. No one who you think is going to give you wisdom is able to do so if they haven't sinned well, and if they haven't processed their sins well. You can't but make mistakes. The problem with this culture is that it gives us no tools to process those mistakes. They sit inside us for the rest of our lives. And then we eventually will suffer from chronic depression. Okay? So remember, mistakes are made. And once you understand why you got married and why your marriage went this way or that way, then maybe you'll have a son who'll come to you one day and say, Dad, I think I'm in love with, so-and-so, I want to get married. And by the time you get wisdom, you have no shame about you. St. Augustine had argued that every saint used to be a sinner. And if you know anything about the life of St. Augustine, he was a naughty, naughty, naughty boy. And people say he had a very strange relationship with his mother. Maybe even they slept together. Who the hell knows? Sure.
What do you think is the relationship between that phenomenon of failing, learning, growing up, and the phenomenon of artists seeming to create great art out of struggle? Is that sort of similar in that the human animal is basically either you're a genius and you can just create art and it's accessible to people, or it takes you a struggle to get to a point where you have something to show everybody. Is that sort of also how the mechanism of wisdom works? You have all of these things and it takes time for you to then finally be able to process it so other people can learn it or see it. Is that what you're saying?
Can I tell you a story?
Please.
And forgive me, it's since I am my own bibliography, I'm going to tell you a story. I was very young when I met my own teacher. So once I became exposed to these ideas, I lost all of my friends. I stopped listening to the sort of Persian pop music. And when I say pop, I don't mean like Miley Cyrus or Beyonce. Our pop music is still very sad. Even if there is a music to which you can dance, you can feel the sadness, in people's voices and the music itself. And so I began to listen to traditional music. And as the ideas became more intense, I began to embody them a little bit. I realized that the only venting mechanism that was available to me was music. It wasn't because I was an artist.
Playing music?
Singing, and playing santur, tombak, daf, setar, and then there came a point where I sang and played at the same time.
What was your band's name?
We didn't have a band. We just gathered every week for about 10 years and we played, all of us together. And that's what we used to do. Families get together, but it would be 10 families. And we all started learning music at the same time. We were all losers, basically. And not knowing how to deal with the brokenness that lived inside us, all of us gravitated towards music. Now, in this way, I suppose you could say that we used art to express the pressure that existed within us. And that particular pressure had to do with philosophy, with religious ideas and concepts, and the journey from, I suppose, not knowing to hopefully getting to know a few things. Okay. The flip side is the following, that you as my father pushed me to play the piano, simply because if I gravitate towards piano, I will not hang out with losers as often. I will not gravitate towards drugs or alcohol. My time will be occupied with playing the piano. I'm not philosophical. I'm not religious. I'm just a kid. There isn't too much sorrow or sadness about me. I haven't yet committed grave sins in life to have shame, all that. And I become a relatively good pianist. And you can consider me an artist, fine. And then I get married. Then once in a while, my companion and I have conflicts. And I don't know how to resolve them. Remember, I am an artist on piano. But when it comes to thinking, not so much. When it comes to speaking, not so much. When it comes to processing, not too much. And so I go to my companion, who's always been very faithful to me, which is the piano. And now I don't go there to play Chopin or Mozart or Beethoven. I go there to express my emotions. And I suppose art takes different form, and it means different things for different people.
That's relativism.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really understand Guernica, the one that was made by Picasso. A certain village is bombed, and Picasso is sitting to have his cup of coffee and a bagel, and he reads the paper and he says, "Oh my God, all these people, just got." Disappeared. And so he goes somewhere and he just grabs a pen and a piece of paper and sketches this thing called Guernica. I look at the painting or the sketch, I can't figure it out. But people say it's about his anger about the war, And I'm thinking, here's a guy, he's a modern painter or artist. So they're very abstract. They kind of just do something, and you go take a look at it, and you ask the artist, what exactly does that mean? It's up to you to figure it out. That's not what you get with Michelangelo. That's not what you get with Leonardo da Vinci. So for them, it's very absolute because they're connected to religion. So most of it is an expression of human condemnation down here in life, but not so much for Picasso. They come around the late 19th, 20th century of all these new forms of art, So you could start as an artist, follow, mimic, a certain format, and then life hits you. Now you begin to experience life yourself. You experience it. You are hurt. You are in pain. And now you use art to express. And art becomes your therapist. So it really depends on who you are, where you are, what talents you have. Most of us don't really have very many talents. So most often what happens when you get beaten up, the only artistic expression that you have is language. But because we're not really accustomed, most of the ways we use language is how do I get an A, how do I write an essay, how do I get milk, what do I do to get a promotion, how do I make peace with my husband or my wife. The sort of language that contains a good amount of reflection, observation, processing things really, really well, understanding emotions, we don't have that. So when something about you breaks down and you want to express yourself, you fumble all over the place. And after a while, you kind of just get angry. Naomi.
So, what would you suggest would be a good way, right, to learn how to utilize language well?
I think in ordinary setting, all of us do really well. You raise your hand, you ask a question. I think your question has a prerequisite. What exactly is it you want to talk about? Let's just say, forgive me, it's a hypothetical. Let's just say, after class, you say, Amir, do you have some time to talk? I say, sure. And it happens sometimes, when people come and all they want to ask is, how are they doing in the classroom? And all of a sudden they begin to cry. And they say, I have no idea why I'm crying. Your beard looks like my dad's, and I haven't talked to my dad for like many, many years. And say, okay, well, so what's going on? And then you want to say a few things, but language fails you. You can't put your mind, you're not focused. You kind of lose your thoughts. And you kind of say, I'm sorry, I'm just going to leave. It's okay. I think in order to use language the right way in regards to things that are meaningful or should be meaningful. And this is not true for everyone because not all of us have been scarred by life, at least not yet. Okay? But the moment you do get scarred by life, and scars have to do with the depth of the wound, sometimes it's just surface, sometimes just blood is gushing out. So there's a good amount of pain. Pain is an emotion. And if the pain happens to be intense, the emotions are intense and deeply rooted. For you to be able to put that intensity in language, you have to understand the emotions. You have to understand the history of the emotions. You have to understand how the emotions were caused. And to some extent, you have to make peace with all of it. Because if you want to come to my office and talk about this, I want to be able to understand you. And you can't just jump around. Because then, at my age, the sort of patience or impatience that lives inside me, I'm going to say, listen, why don't you go home, think about this, and then write me an email. And then what's going to happen is you're going to go home, you're going to write me an email saying, Amir, thank you for your time. I'm still processing. I say, okay, I'll send you a good email like next week. Next week passes, the following week passes, the semester goes away, and now I'm in some nursing home. You know, you hear my name somewhere, and you say, maybe I should go visit him. Now you say, Amir, now I understand. I say, I'm sorry, I can't hear you anymore. Do you remember me? I have no idea who you are. So your story becomes irrelevant. And I go back to something that James Baldwin had said, and it's something we've talked about plenty of times. To have a conversation, to communicate, there needs to be communion. In other words, you need to see me as your community. We have to break bread. It's an emotional bread, intellectual bread. It's an act of empathy, which means you have to be eloquent and articulate enough, insightful enough, to take me out of my own skin and put me in your shoes so I can understand, I can feel. You know, unlike anything else, it's an art. And it's like riding the bicycle for the first time. Are you going to do well? No. You're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to walk away saying, I'm a 50-year-old woman, and yet I can't speak about these things. How embarrassing. Then you won't contact me for a long time until you embrace the fact that you're just stupid, at least in this area of life. Okay? Then you'll work on it a little bit, and you work on it some more. You'll talk to your friends. You will write. You will do therapy. You will listen to YouTube clips by different people. And then at a certain point, you say, okay, let me see if I can write this well. And after many years of thinking and feeling and observing, then you begin to write. And then every time you want to continue your writing, you go at the very beginning of your essay. And then you begin to realize the gaps and holes. You know, you were going to start paragraph number 25, and now you're fixing paragraph number 1. Because now you see things you couldn't see before. And it really is a craft. In a culture such as this, where you're supposed to get things right the first time, if not the first time, the second time, if not the second, at least the third time, well, you're dealing with a lot of depressed, lonely, miserable people. You can't get anything that has value right the first 10, 15 years of your life. You know, sin is good if you know how to process it. If you don't know, you're going to be constipated for a long, long time. And you're going to be bloated. Which means that when someone looks at you, like me, I'm looking at you, what are you looking at? Constipation. And the truth is, you gotta really cut people some slack because this stuff is really, really tough. Introspection is tough. Feeling is tough. Coming to understand things is tough. So my recommendation, you guys come to this class, all of you being strangers. We have 16 weeks living under the same roof, about 3 hours a week. You raise your hand and you just let it out. Who gives a shit what other people think? Because you're not going to get this forum anywhere else. Unless you pay someone $100 an hour to listen to your stuff. And then in the end, prescribe you some, pills. You know, when the 12-step program for the AA is really, really interesting. One of the first commandments is you just stand up and say, "Hi, I'm a neurosurgeon, and I'm a therapist, and I'm an alcoholic." You know, the moment you say you're an alcoholic, people will say, "So you're a neurosurgeon? And you're also a therapist? What the hell is wrong with you?" I mean, you have to get rid of so many layers of you have to remove so much value from yourself to confess that you are a human being with a whole host of issues. And from that point on, you guys can build a community, friendship. You know, and that's what friendship really is all about. Don't hang out with idiots. You know, have enough confidence in your own experiences and accept your own experiences. So next time you guys go out, say, "I want to talk to you about my mom. She's a bitch, and let me tell you why." And you know that this friend is not going to judge you. They're going to sit back and listen. Both of you are going to come together and come up with a solution. And the solution is not going to be easy for a long, long time. You know.